There are two main reasons to really be interested in this one. The first is that it's currently one of, if not the best GMT for around $1,000. And second, it's easily the best Explorer 2 alternative for $1,000. And ironically, that last one is also a reason some people avoid it. For them, it evidently hits a little too close to home. But we'll get to that and more. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and today we're going to check out the Christopher Ward C63 Sealander GMT. A subtle yet sophisticatedly refined GMT. And just for convenience sake, from here on out, I'm just going to call Christopher Ward CW, and we're just going to refer to this as the C63 GMT. Otherwise, I'm going to spend 5 minutes saying the entire thing. Now for this one, Christopher Ward went a little bit smaller, giving you a width of 39 millimeters and making the lug-to-lug just shy of 46, creating a watch that's perfect for a wide variety of wrist sizes, including those of the slender variety. Total thickness is 12.1 millimeters, and that's fairly impressive for a capable GMT with 150 meters of water resistance. Now, rounding everything out, the C63 also has a 20 millimeter lug width, a screwed down crown, flat sapphire with AR, Sellita SW330-2 Traveler's GMT movement, and an almost ideal weight of 145 grams on its bracelets, give or take a link or two. Now, before we get too far, there are a couple of things I want to point out about this watch. The first of which is that this is my watch. I bought it a while ago. So you could consider this a long-term review, and this review is probably way overdue. But this also explains why this has the older dial design, where it has the Christopher Ward name on it, which is always a bit controversial, and recently they switched it over to just their brand logo, which is this braille-looking flag thing. And these days, it almost looks like a goofy QR code. But anyway, the second reason I wanted to point this out is that while I did buy this directly from Christopher Ward, I bought it during a special sale, and it was listed as nearly new, not new. So if you see anything kind of odd in these macro shots on the case, that's probably why. And speaking of the case, let's talk about it. This is what CW refers to as a Lightcatcher case, which is really just their design language when it comes to their cases, where it's defined by smooth flowing curves from lug to lug, as well as well-defined divisions separating out the brushed and polished surfaces. And here, the beautifully polished edges not only highlight the sleek design, but they're angled in a way to really catch the light as it moves around. Hence the name Lightcatcher. And here it is extremely well done, and especially for the price. Moreover, I think this type of design is ideal for this type of watch, where it's still very rugged, very tooly, but with hints or touches of refined sophistication, just like yours truly. Or at least in my mind. Now, turning the watch over, you can see the exhibition case back, as well as the Sellita SW330-2 movement. It's not the most decorated movement I've ever seen, but it's not bad either. Back to the front and at the right, there is a signed screw-down crown nestled in those nubby crown guards, which overall is pretty easy to get a hold of and use. And then we have the steel bezel with 24-hour indicators in black enamel. I really love that the flat sapphire rises out of it at the same angle before tapering off. And I think that and the brushed finish really give this watch a nice, clean, cohesive, tooly flow. However, this is where one of two potential issues come into play, and that's the homage factor. And it's more evident in this particular colorway. Here, where you have a steel bezel paired with a white dial and orange highlights, hits a little too close to home for some Rolex fans. And with that, the homage question inevitably comes into play. So, is this an homage? Yeah, I'd say it is. But for me, it's a lowercase, not uppercase H. And by that, I mean it's not a copy, it's not a one-for-one. But rather, CW was inspired by that classic look, and they wanted to incorporate it into their C63 Sealander series. As everything else about this watch is directly taken from their regular Sealanders, not an Explorer 2. So yeah, in the traditional sense of the word, it is an homage. And I know this is hard for some people to hear, but in some ways, I think they've actually improved on that classic look. As the C63 has a better size, better handset, better date position, and better price. I know, it's sacrilege, but come on, you know it's true. Anyway, let's get into the specifics of the dial. This colorway has a flat polar white base that's then paired with a black painted chapter ring at the very outer edges of the dial, along with the occasional touch of orange for an accent. Moving just inward, you have the small metallic bar applied indices. And zooming in, you can see how they're beautifully done, where the sides are brushed and the inward slope facing the dial is polished, catching the light and drawing your focus towards that inward portion of the dial, which is where you find the hands, also beautifully executed in a mixture of brushed and polished surfaces, with the exception of the GMT hand, which stands out boldly thanks to its orange and black color scheme. You wouldn't think there'd be much contrast between a white dial and metallic silver, but here, once again, CW shows brilliance in their design and execution, as the metallic elements on the dial catch the light while the flat dial stays consistent, helping them to easily stand out and creates a highly functional design sitting on top of a clean white canvas. At the very top of the dial, you have the branding, which we've already talked about has changed. Then below the dial, you have a small minimal amount of text, which I vastly prefer over the paragraph you find on a similar watch. And then just below that, you have a cutout for the date with a color matched date wheel. And that position at the 6 o'clock really helps to keep a nice symmetric flow across the midline. When it comes down to it, it's just a simple, classically themed design that's gorgeously executed. It's simultaneously straightforward and clean, yet refined and captivating, which is just perfect for a go anywhere and do anything kind of watch. Compared to other dials, it may be a tad boring, but for as long as I've had it, I still love staring at it. I just enjoy taking in how every element plays with the light. And I also love the Trident second hand, how the orange tip easily stands out, and for whatever reason, I just love watching that Trident's shadow as it moves around. I found myself staring at it more than a few times while at a stoplight. Now, moving on, let's talk about the Lume. And here I got one word for you: impressive. I wish that there was some Lume on the second hand, but what is here does go the distance. In my comparison test, not only did it outlast a Seiko diver, but it also outlasted CW's own C60 Tide diver. And for a go anywhere, do anything sports watch, that's impressive. So Lume will not disappoint here. Movement-wise, this is using a Sellita SW330-2, which is a slightly newer, upgraded version that now has 56 hours of power reserve, rather than the 42 hours of the older SW330s. Great Swiss movement, and it's also a pretty expensive movement, which is why these are really priced the way they are. Can't really get around that. And this also brings up that last potential issue, which is that this is a caller's GMT, not a traveler's or a true GMT. And again, this is only a potential issue depending on your point of view. Because despite what some people say, there's nothing wrong with a caller's GMT. It has its own place in the watch world, and it's all about how you use it. And until recently, at this price point, you didn't have any other option. And even now, with the new Miyota 9075 true GMTs out there, options are still pretty limited. Moving on, let's talk about bracelet and strap options. Now, when I originally bought this, it came with one of those Tide straps, which despite the name is not a detergent. It's a nylon two-piece strap made from recycled ocean plastic. It's a good strap with a pretty nice message behind it. But honestly, I never really warmed up to it. It's a bit stiff and just seemed to be taking forever to break in. So I quickly ditched it, and for a long time I wore it on this brown leather Timex strap. And this is one of those Timex pay straps with the built-in credit card thing. I did a whole video on it a while ago. But because of that, it made this a great travel combo. Eventually though, I did break down and buy a bracelet from Christopher Ward. Now these bracelets are pretty pricey, but I think they are worth it. It's an oyster style bracelet that perfectly matches the brushed steel of the case. It also has pretty much everything you could want. Solid quick release end links, solid links secured with screws, a nice taper from 20 to 18, and a milled clasp with an on-the-fly adjustment system. Pretty much the perfect bracelet for a go anywhere, do anything watch that is the C63. It's a great bracelet, and honestly better than most watches in this price range, and especially if you're talking Seiko. And I'm especially impressed with the fit and ease of the quick released end links. Most quick release bracelets I've had are either so hard to get off they might as well not be, or the end link fit is so sloppy it's just a mess. Where here, they're simply done right. Not only does it have a nice tight fit, but they're pretty easy to get on and off, which again is great for a watch you're traveling with. The one complaint I have against it is that it uses male end links, not female, as it does extend out the effective lug-to-lug, although here not by much, as the end links actually curve down rather aggressively. And overall, on my 7¼ inch wrist, I'd say the fit is just about perfect. On the bracelet, it has a good solid feel to it, yet it's still light enough that you don't really think about it, and balanced enough that it stays squarely where it should. Yet as good as this is, half the time I still find myself switching to a leather strap, as it gives it a different look and maybe makes it a little more comfortable and lighter. Honestly, it just depends on what I feel like that day. Whether I want something slightly dressed up, or if I feel like I want a watch ready for adventure. Earlier, I said these were about $1,000, and that's not entirely true. To be more specific, if you're getting this on anything other than the bracelet, it's about $1,040 right now. But if you do want it on the bracelet, and I think you probably do, it's more like $1,200. So it's still sort of around there. But Christopher Ward does have the occasional sale, which is where I got this one, as well as there are frequent promo codes out there. So you can get it for a lower price, and if you can, I highly recommend it. Although one quick warning to those of us in the US, and this isn't about the watch, but just in general, and that's that I believe anything over $800 is subject to duty taxes. And when it comes to Christopher Ward, this often catches some of us off guard, as most of their stuff is right at or over that. In terms of value, it's kind of an odd time to be looking at GMTs. A year ago, if you wanted a GMT, around 800 plus is typically where you'd be looking. There were some exceptions, but this is the normal price range. Whereas now, thanks to Seiko, the market is being flooded with cheaper NH34 based GMTs. Plus, the Miyota 9075 true GMT watches are starting to come out now, and most of those are around $1,000 as well. So if you're just looking at GMTs in general, there's a lot more competition these days than there used to be. In fact, I got one right here, and I probably got like 4 or 5 back there. In some ways, this is going to be the year of GMTs. However, if you're just looking at watches with this specific movement, then this Christopher Ward's going to come in a little bit lower than the median price. On top of that, throw in the fantastic fit and finish, great bracelet, good lume. I mean, this thing is pretty much everything you could want. It's the complete package. And after that, I think you start to see that there is a lot of value here, which is the big reason that most people love Christopher Ward. The only exception is to those luxury fans who don't believe it's as good as it is. But for those of us not in the luxury game, Christopher Ward gives you a glimpse of what to expect at those higher tiers at a reasonable price. For the most part, I wouldn't say CW's designs are original or innovative, but what they do is that they nail the execution. From top to bottom, case, dial, bracelet, they're doing it right. And I think this watch is proof of that. And it's one of the reasons it's definitely a keeper for me. Overall, the Sealander GMT has a subtle classic design, with touches of sophisticated refinement, creating an ideal, go anywhere, do anything kind of watch, making it a perfect travel companion when you pair it with a GMT. Now, before I wrap this whole thing up, I should point out that there's also a new kid on the block over at Christopher Ward, and that's with their new Dune lineup. Hopefully, some point I'll get my hands on one. But from what I've seen, it sort of fills the same go anywhere, do anything sports watch role as a Sealander. Although I think there's room for both, as the main difference here is style. To me, the Sealander seems more modern, whereas the Dune, with its lack of crown guards and domed crystal, seems more vintage. So definitely room for both, and it just depends on where your tastes lie. For me, I think it's definitely with the Sealander. Anyway, that's my take on the Christopher Ward C63 Sealander GMT. As usual, let me know yours down below, as well as let me know what your ideal GMT is. And as always, you guys know what to do down below. Like, comment, subscribe. It really does help the channel. I'm Shane, this is Relative Time, and I'll see you next time.